Greetings from Tokyo, my dear friends. This is Daisuke, and I very much hope that this video finds you well and in very good spirits wherever you are in the world. And today I'd like to continue on with a video a day wherein I talk in very general terms about a film or a TV series that in one form or another I feel has something to do with the current Halloween season, October 2020, and Halloween is just a few days away as of the time of the making of this video. And so with that, today I'd like to focus in on a film from a very interesting, engaging, and unique filmmaker. This particular filmmaker is one that unfortunately I have not spoken about in as much detail as I would like here on this channel, and that's due to not having the time or the opportunity to do so. But hopefully I would very much love the opportunity to talk more about this film and other films by this filmmaker, because I'm a big fan, and I have been since some years back, and I have a number of his releases that have been made over the past few years onto Blu-ray, and so it's a very exciting filmography to dive into. And this film in particular, I think, is very exciting and very strange and eerie and so perfect for this season. The filmmaker is Werner Herzog. And Herzog's film from 1979 is NOSFERATU the Vampyre. In German, and please pardon me for my very poor German pronunciation, the title is NOSFERATU Phantom der Nacht. Again, from 1979. This stars Klaus Kinski and Isabelle Adjani and Bruno Ganz and others. This is a film that is Herzog's vampire horror film, whose main sources of inspiration outside of Herzog's own literary and creative leanings are, I think, two. First being the source novel material, the novel of Bram Stoker, which is called Dracula, and the second being the early 1920s silent film from F.W. Murnau, which is Nosferatu, and the Masters of the Cinema release is what I have in front of me right now. So these two main sources of inspiration, I think, are at the heart of this Herzog film, Nosferatu. However, I should point out that it is my understanding and belief that the 1979 film is not specifically or strictly speaking a direct remake of the F.W. Murnau film, nor is it a direct and 100% direct adaptation of the Bram Stoker novel. However, I would say that instead of a direct adaptation or remake, the Herzog work is, it takes its inspiration from these two sources and tries to do certain things that are linking quite specifically to such sources of inspiration, or that are playing on a variation of the theme, or are focusing in on certain aspects that might not necessarily have been the focus in either of those two sources of inspiration. So there is a lot going on here in terms of the Herzog work, which is therefore another way to say that the film is not a remake or it's not a remake or a direct adaptation, but it is more the Herzog impression or the sensibilities as he had them vis-a-vis these particular works. And so there are, of course, very great, strong connections, both visually and thematically, but there are also ways in which the film itself, I think, really does things that are not necessarily in these earlier two sources, which is therefore another way to say that it's a film that is its own entity. At the same time, of course, we have to remember the important linkages that exist between the Herzog work and the earlier works. And in fact, I would dare say too that one of these days I would love to do a specific deep dive discussion on this work and other works by Herzog. And I think a discussion of Nosferatu really requires a specific discussion of Murnau and also a specific discussion of Bram Stoker. And so I would love that opportunity one of these days. Please forgive me for not being able to do so this time around, but maybe soon. I don't know if you're interested. If not, then that's okay as well. But if you are interested, please let me know. If you're interested in maybe having more videos about discussing the works of Herzog with more detail, then please let me know, and I'll see what I can do going forward, maybe in the next few months or into next year. But for now, let us focus in on the film itself, which is a very expressive and very evocative piece. And it's one that has many different tones and impressions about it that I think make it a very consistent work in the filmography of Herzog on the one hand, and yet at the same time I think there are aspects that make it very distinct and give it its own character, even within the very exciting and fiery and quite immediate filmography that is the filmography of Herzog. So what do I mean by this specifically? Well, I mean, on the one hand, there is of course a really a powerful concern with certain connections made to a cinematic legacy. And Herzog himself, I think, has acknowledged in, for example, the great commentary track that's included in the BFI set, that he felt that he really wanted to make some kind of connection with the Murnau film, which he considers one of the greatest films from German cinema ever. And so he wanted to somehow he wanted to make a cinematic statement through this relationship with the cinematic past. And so this turned into his interpretation of the inspirational source materials. That was Nosferatu. And also we have the way in which the camera is focusing on the subtleties of character development and choices by actors made. And in this discussion, we have to make mention of the fact that this is another collaboration, cinematic one, between Herzog and Klaus Kinski, which is one of the most intriguing cinema collaborations, director-actor collaborations in cinema history. So this being another film in that relationship of theirs. And if I could mention something about that in a very general way, I could say that what's remarkable about the Kinski performance that Herzog was able to have the actor provide here is that it's remarkable for many reasons. It's remarkable because of the iconic look, the Max Schreck-like homage look that still has the Kinski identity about it, the undeniable Kinski edge, and the face and the contours and the look and the manner and the way in which he's controlling his body and his facial movements and arm movements and the like. And also the idea that if we really examine Kinski's performance, we can realize that relative, say, to other Kinski performances in other Herzog films, and indeed other Kinski films, this performance is in many ways very, very nuanced. And not to say his other performances aren't nuanced, so let me take that word back. Maybe nuance isn't the right word. More like it's very serene, and it's very calm, and there are very few passages of a sense of the chaotic. There is, of course, a great deal of menace and horror and threat. Don't get me wrong, because this is the main thrust of the story. But the way it is delivered, the way it is perceived, and the way that we see the language of Kinski, the way he turns his body, the way he moves across the frame, the way he seems to be using his body language, is very serene. And I find this to be a great, a beautifully artistically paradoxical sensibility that is encaptured in this film. And that gives way, I think, to a lot of potential for emotional depth in the character, and we really can get the opportunity to feel and sense what it is about this character and the depths of his particular predicament and how it is he interacts with other people. And I think this then leads to one of the great passages of any Herzog film, which is the scenes that exist between Klaus Kinski and Isabelle Adjani, which are, as I say, among the greatest of any Herzog film. I think for many reasons, but one of which, the primary reason for me anyway, one of them being that there is a real sense of a romantic nature to them, or a serenely erotic sense about him and sensibility about them. And these elements are commanded so well by Herzog and company. So, and the performances again by Adjani and by Kinski, I think, are meet that challenge so impeccably well. And also the idea that the film presents, which is on the one hand, it seems to be trying to suggest a kind of fictionalized historical past on the one hand, and yet when it tries to make its turns into the horror and to the atmospheric, it really takes its time and uses those moments of cinematic ambiguity to turn the world that we are occupying into the otherworldly. In other words, the film does such a great job in creating a sense of atmosphere such that we can feel like the cinematic landscape is being transformed through some kind of surrealistic sensibility into the otherworldly. And it is in this landscape of the otherworldly that we can, as viewers, observe the goings-on of these otherworldly characters, the Klaus Kinski, etc. So that is, I think, a really cinematic triumph, and it's one that Herzog really achieves with great care and artistry and aplomb. So, not to mention, of course, the fact that this is a horror film because of its story qualities and nature and atmosphere and some of the events that occur. For sure. But there are also elements of the macabre and the unknown. There are also elements of the absurd in terms of human behavior, and that's also on display. And the idea of the sincerity and absurdity of certain modes of human behavior that I think is also at the heart of Herzog's works, as well as a kind of capturing, if you will, of a love of the environment and scenery, and a certain earthiness, and the fog and the dark and the mist, and just capturing these elements that are used in a way that give rise to a real artistic freedom and a real triumphant confidence, if you will, in the cinematic craftsmanship that we are dealing with here from Herzog. So I think all in all, this is a magnificent work. It's one that has, as I say, many different tones and elements to it, because it doesn't feel like a supercharged, bloody suspense horror thriller in that vein, but rather it feels very lugubrious and methodical, and thus very, it has a really lovely pace to it. I mean, the very fact that I use the word lugubrious, I think that's a very good word for it, a lugubrious pace. There's a sense of this being very slow, very methodical, and very caring with the cinematic eye. And this is all, I think, giving rise to a pondering of the emotional weight, potentially speaking anyway, of relationships that are created or destroyed as we see them, and also the sense of the absurd and the ironic, which is also on display, and also the sense of human nature and how it reacts in these situations of crises that we find ourselves in terms of the introduction of the villain, how that's related to plague or pestilence and similar situations like that. And that is therefore, in essence, I think, the reason why this film is very much in keeping with Herzog's filmography, but also has a really distinct feel and charm and atmosphere to it, thus making it, I think, really great for the Halloween season. Once again, let me just end by saying that I really have to apologize, because this kind of discussion, I think, is not really complete unless we have a much better detailed discussion of some of the earlier works of inspiration, such as this that I was trying to highlight earlier. And so this video is not meant to be in any way an exhaustive conversation on the Herzog film, but it's just meant to be my way of trying to share with you an example of a film that I think is really fun to watch, especially during the Halloween season, because of certain one or more aspects involved with respect to the cinematic expressions. So maybe, as I say, one of these days I would love to speak more about the works of Herzog on this channel. If I have that opportunity, I will certainly do my best to let you know as soon as possible. But please keep in mind that Herzog is a filmmaker that I have been thinking about for many years. I've had the great honor of having experienced his works for the first time when I was still quite young, when I was a teenager. And I was shocked. I was unclear. I was confused. Sometimes I was exhilarated. Sometimes I felt angry. Sometimes I felt frustrated, and I felt agitated. But I think that's part of the aspects of the filmmaking and the challenges involved when actually trying to watch and engage in his works. And I think that's part of the point. And I think in that sense also, just to conclude, to turn back to Nosferatu, I think there is a real, interestingly, there is a sense of the serene and the meditative that is really on display here. And one might think that maybe this is not consistent with Herzog's work, but perhaps upon further examination we can realize that yes, these aspects of the contemplative and the meditative are indeed very consistent with the cinematography, the filmography of Herzog. And so I think Nosferatu is a great place to go in terms of an October film, but also it's a great place to go if you are seeking some entry point into the world of Herzog and his films. So wherever you are, my friends, this is the film Nosferatu the Vampire. And I should say also in passing that, as some of you may know, there are different versions of the film, the English version and the German version, and so they are slightly different due to circumstances of the filming. So perhaps people might tend to gravitate towards the German language version, which I think is perfectly fine. But just note also that I think I've seen both versions a number of times, and so while I prefer, I too gravitate towards the German language version, I see that the English language version still holds a lot of potential. So I think either version is okay going forward. So if that's an issue for you, just please note that as well. But you can watch both as well if you have the time and the opportunity. In any event, my friends, this is the film from 1979. This is Nosferatu the Vampire, or Nosferatu Phantom der Nacht. Okay, my friends, so that's it for now. And so until we meet again, please be happy and healthy and well, and please keep on watching a lot of great movies. We are almost done with this October series, so I have a couple more videos to go and then we'll be done. So I hope to see you in those final videos, and if not, I hope to see you elsewhere, my friends. In any event, please stay strong, stay well, and cheers.